Greetings. Today, we'll calmly and clearly examine the true difference between white and brown sugar. Is there a fundamental difference in health benefits between them? Or is it more a matter of marketing and taste? On store shelves, white and brown sugar are often presented as antagonists, a refined, harmful product versus a natural and healthy alternative. This image is actively cultivated by marketing, creating the feeling that by choosing brown sugar, consumers are being healthier. However, the reality is more complex and prosaic. At their core, both products are sucrose, and their fundamental effects on the body are identical in key respects. The differences lie in the subtleties of production, the presence of minimal amounts of impurities, and consequently, in their taste and culinary properties. In this analysis, we'll separate scientific facts from myths to understand whether the choice between white and brown sugar is a matter of health or purely a matter of taste preference and culinary needs. To truly understand the differences between white and brown sugar, it's necessary to follow their journey from field to shelf. Both products share a common origin: sugarcane or sugar beet. Separation occurs not at the raw material cultivation stage, but in processing plants, where the same initial product takes on two distinct forms due to the degree of purification. The initial process is identical. Cane stalks or beet roots are crushed, and their sweet juice is extracted. This juice contains, in addition to sucrose, a complex of organic and mineral substances. Next, the juice is purified to remove coarse impurities and evaporated to a concentrated syrup, where sugar crystals begin to form. At this stage, we obtain an intermediate product, raw sugar. It has a distinct brown color, a sticky consistency, and a distinctive flavor due to its high molasses content. Molasses, or blackstrap treacle, is a thick, dark brown liquid that is a byproduct of sugar production. It concentrates all the non-sugar components of the original juice. These include mineral salts of potassium, calcium, magnesium, and iron, trace amounts of B vitamins, organic acids, and coloring agents. The subsequent fate of this raw material determines whether it becomes white or brown sugar. To obtain white refined sugar, the purification process is continued to the highest possible degree. The raw sugar is redissolved, and the resulting solution is repeatedly filtered through special adsorbents, most often bone char, to remove all coloring pigments and foreign impurities. The solution is then evaporated again and crystallized under controlled conditions. These processes produce pure, dry, snow-white crystals, whose chemical composition approaches that of pure sucrose. All the minerals, vitamins, and organic substances found in molasses are absent from white sugar. Its purity is approximately 99.9%. Brown sugar is a product of intentionally incomplete refining. There are two fundamental approaches to its production. The first, more traditional, involves stopping the refining process at a certain stage, without completing it. This leaves a predetermined amount of natural molasses on the sucrose crystals. It is the percentage of molasses that determines the grade and name of brown sugar. Light brown sugar, such as Demerara, contains a relatively small film of molasses. Dark varieties, such as Muscovado, or soft. Dark brown sugar are characterized by a much larger amount, which gives them a darker color, a moist, almost sticky texture, and an intense caramel toffee flavor, sometimes even with a slight bitterness. The second approach, widely used in the modern food industry for cost reduction and standardization, involves producing brown sugar by blending. In this case, ready-made white refined sugar of the highest purity is taken and mechanically mixed with a certain amount of molasses to color and moisten the crystals. Thus, from a technological standpoint, brown sugar is not a separate product, but either an intermediate stage of refining or a commercially prepared mixture based on white sugar. Its distinctive properties, color, aroma, and texture are determined entirely by the presence and quantity of molasses, and not by any special qualities of the original unrefined raw material. Claims of significant nutritional superiority of brown sugar over white require an objective analysis based on a comparison of their precise chemical compositions. Such analysis demonstrates that any differences in micronutrient content are purely symbolic and have no significant impact on health at typical consumption levels. The fundamental component of both types of sugar is sucrose, a disaccharide composed of equal parts glucose and fructose. Sucrose is responsible for the sweet taste, high caloric content, and metabolic response. In both white and brown sugar, it accounts for between 97 and 99.5% of the total mass. Consequently, the caloric content of these products is virtually identical, approximately 397 kilocalories per 100 grams. Any claims of lower caloric content of brown sugar are mythical. A possible difference of 1 or 2 calories per teaspoon has no practical significance. The glycemic index, which determines the rate at which blood glucose levels rise, is also the same, since both sugars are, in a metabolic sense, pure sucrose. The only objective difference in composition is the presence of residual molasses in brown sugar, which gives it color and flavor. It is this molasses that contains trace minerals and vitamins extracted from sugarcane or beets. These include potassium, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, iron, and minimal amounts of B vitamins, such as B3 and B6. However, the key point is not their presence, but their absolute and relative amounts. Consider the calcium content. 100 grams of dark brown sugar can contain approximately 85 milligrams, while the daily requirement for an adult is 1,000 milligrams. To meet this requirement solely from brown sugar, one would have to consume over a kilogram of the product, equivalent to almost 4,000 extra kilocalories, and completely unacceptable from a healthy eating perspective. The iron content in the same amount of sugar is approximately 1.9 milligrams, compared to the daily requirement of 18 milligrams for women. Therefore, brown sugar cannot be considered even a supplemental, let alone a significant source of these nutrients. Moreover, to obtain the same amount of potassium found in one medium potato or banana, or the calcium in a glass of milk, one would have to consume a quantity of brown sugar that would deal a devastating blow to the pancreas and metabolic health. Therefore, from a nutritional perspective, the difference in micronutrient composition between the two sugars is clinically irrelevant. No authoritative nutrition source recommends brown sugar as a healthy alternative, as its primary effects on the body, delivering empty calories and causing sharp spikes in blood glucose, are identical to those of white sugar. Therefore, the choice between them cannot be motivated by health or nutritional considerations. It is a purely gastronomic decision based on a preference for the more complex caramel flavor and moist texture in certain foods and drinks. In terms of their fundamental effects on human physiology and health, white and brown sugar are virtually identical. Any claims of fundamentally different effects on the body are scientifically unfounded, as both products are concentrated sources of the same molecule, sucrose. This means that their metabolic pathways of absorption, their final breakdown products, and their effects on the body's systems are indistinguishable in key respects. The key parameter, the glycemic index, is the same for both sugars. The glycemic index measures the rate at which carbohydrates in a product are broken down into glucose and absorbed into the bloodstream. Since both white and brown sugar consist primarily of pure, rapidly digestible sucrose, their GI is high, around 70 units. This means that after consumption, there is a sharp and rapid rise in blood glucose, followed by an equally sharp release of insulin from the pancreas. Such spikes, when repeated regularly, are considered a factor in the development of insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, and type 2 diabetes. The presence of trace amounts of minerals in brown sugar molasses does not significantly slow this process. Sucrose molecules immediately break down into glucose and fructose, and this process is unaffected by microscopic impurities. The calorie content of these foods is also indistinguishable. Both contain about 4 kilocalories per gram. The difference, if any, is less than 1% and is completely offset by the fact that brown sugar, due to its moisture content and higher density, can weigh slightly more in the same volume, for example in a teaspoon. Therefore, from an energy balance and body weight perspective, it makes no difference whether you use white or brown sugar. Both are sources of empty calories, that is, calories that are not accompanied by any essential nutrients, vitamins, or fiber, necessary for normal body function. Consuming either in excess is equally likely to result in excess energy, which, in the absence of physical activity, will be stored as fat. The metabolic risks associated with excess sugar consumption are identical for both types, regularly exceeding the recommended intake, which according to the World Health Organization is no more than 10% of daily calories, and ideally less than 5%, leads to the same consequences. These include an increased risk of obesity, tooth decay, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, cardiovascular disease, and chronic inflammation. The trace amounts of potassium or calcium in brown sugar have no protective effect against these systemic risks. Moreover, the illusion of its healthiness can psychologically encourage increased consumption, which ultimately only exacerbates the negative consequences. For example, adding brown sugar to tea or baked goods under the pretext that it is more natural does not make the final product any less harmful when consumed in excess. Thus, from the perspective of evidence-based medicine and nutrition, white and brown sugar should be considered functionally equivalent products. Their effects on blood glucose levels, caloric intake, and long-term metabolic risks are identical. Choosing between them is not a tool for improving health. The only reasonable strategy for health is a general reduction in the consumption of added sugars in any form, whether white refined, brown, coconut, cane, or any other. Their role in the diet should be strictly measured, and preference should be given to natural sources of sweetness, such as whole fruits, which contain fiber, vitamins, and do not cause sharp spikes in blood sugar. In professional cooking and home baking, white and brown sugar are not used interchangeably, but rather as distinct tools with clearly defined functions. Their choice is directly dictated by the recipe and the desired end result, as the physicochemical properties of the presence or absence of molasses have a profound impact on the cooking process. The profound difference begins with the flavor profile. White sugar, being almost pure sucrose, provides a clean, clear, yet uniform sweetness that serves as a background without overpowering other flavors. Brown sugar, thanks to molasses, imparts a complex bouquet of secondary and tertiary flavors. Molasses contains caramelized sugars, organic acids, and mineral salts, which together create a multifaceted sensation with notes of burnt caramel, toffee, malt, and sometimes a slight licorice bitterness. This makes it indispensable in recipes that require a sense of warmth, depth, and tradition. Gingerbread houses and cookies, barbecue sauce, marinades for roast pork or duck, dark fruit pies, gingerbread, and some varieties of rye bread. In such dishes, brown sugar acts not just as a sweetener, but as a full-fledged flavor and aroma additive, working synergistically with spices such as cinnamon, ginger, cloves, and allspice. The next critical difference is its impact on the structure and texture of the finished product. The hygroscopic nature of molasses causes brown sugar to actively bind and retain moisture. This property has a direct impact on baked goods. When using brown sugar, the dough initially contains more bound water, which during baking leads to the formation of a denser, moister, and often slightly chewy or sticky crumb. This texture is highly prized in desserts such as brownies, moist muffins, chewy oatmeal cookies, and gingerbread, where dryness is considered a defect. An additional benefit comes from the natural acidity of molasses, which can react neutralizingly with baking soda, releasing carbon dioxide and imparting additional fluffiness to the dough. White sugar, lacking these properties, produces a drier, crumblier, and airier texture, ideal for sponge cakes, meringues, short crust pastries, and airy cakes. Directly substituting one type of sugar for another without recalculating the proportions of liquid and baking powder will almost certainly ruin the expected texture of the dish. The third aspect is its role in browning reactions. Brown sugar significantly accelerates and enhances two key processes responsible for the color of finished foods: caramelization and the Maillard reaction. Molasses already contains pre-caramelization products, so glazes, sauces, and baked goods coated with brown sugar acquire a rich, dark amber or deep brown color, faster and at lower temperatures. This is especially important for creating glossy, dark, and sticky glazes for meats and vegetables, as well as for achieving a uniform, dark crust on gingerbread and gingerbread. White sugar caramelizes, producing a lighter, golden hue, and requires more precise temperature control to prevent burning. Thus, in culinary practice, these two sugars serve different roles. White sugar is a standardized raw material for precise control of sweetness and texture. Brown sugar is a complex ingredient, combining the functions of a sweetener, flavoring, humectant, and coloring agent. Its choice is a technological decision, not an attempt to make a dish healthier. The choice between white and brown sugar must also be considered through the lens of economics and global ecology. These aspects are often overlooked, but they shape the real cost of the product and its impact on the planet. From an economic perspective, brown sugar, especially that's sold as natural, cane, or unrefined, almost always commands a higher shelf price. This price is made up of several components. First, there's the cost of creating and maintaining the marketing image of a healthy and conscious alternative. Second, for genuine unrefined varieties imported from cane-producing countries like Mauritius, Costa Rica, or Brazil, the price includes the costs of international logistics and customs duties. However, in the case of a mass-produced product that's a mixture of cheap white beet sugar and molasses, the color premium essentially becomes a price for misleading the consumer. Production costs are minimal and profitability is high, making this brown sugar a profitable commercial project based on the psychology of choice. An environmental analysis reveals a more complex picture. The carbon and water footprint of the sugar industry as a whole is colossal, and the color of the final product plays a secondary role. The main negative environmental impact occurs at the agricultural stage. Large monoculture plantations of sugarcane and sugar beet require intensive water use, which in arid regions leads to aquifer depletion. The use of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides causes soil erosion, groundwater pollution, and a decrease in biodiversity. Processing raw materials into sugar also requires significant energy inputs for transportation, milling, evaporation, and purification. Theoretically, producing brown sugar could require several % less energy due to the elimination of the final refining and bleaching stages. However, these potential savings across the entire value chain are extremely insignificant. Furthermore, brown sugar, especially dark and moist ones, has a shorter shelf life and may require special transport conditions to prevent caking, which partially offsets the energy benefit. The truly significant environmental criterion is not the physical properties of sugar, but the agricultural and social practices employed in its production. For consumers seeking to minimize their environmental footprint and support ethical production, the key is not the words brown or unrefined, but the presence of independent international certifications on the packaging. Organic farming certificates guarantee the absence of synthetic pesticides and GMOs. Fair trade certification confirms fair wages for farmers and investments in local community development. The Bonsucro certification system focuses on sustainable water use and ecosystem preservation in cane-growing regions. These distinctions can appear on the packaging of both brown and white cane sugar. Therefore, making an informed choice is not about choosing one color over another, but about finding a product produced with sustainable development principles, regardless of its degree of refining. Otherwise, overpaying for brown sugar risks funding not real environmental practices, but merely a cleverly constructed mythology around the color of the crystals. Today, we've discussed how the debate about the nutritional and health benefits of brown sugar over white sugar is scientifically unfounded. Both products are essentially sucrose and have identical effects on the body. A high glycemic response, equal caloric content, and comparable long-term metabolic risks with excess consumption. The negligible mineral content of molasses is of no practical value for meeting a person's daily nutritional needs. Therefore, the choice should be determined by other, more rational criteria. In cooking, this is a technical necessity. Brown sugar is an ingredient with its own character, intended to impart a distinctive flavor, color, and moisture to certain dishes. In everyday use, it may be a matter of cost savings, as classic white sugar is often cheaper. If sustainability principles are important to consumers, They should pay attention not to the shade of the crystals, but to the presence of international certificates confirming the eco-friendliness and ethical production. Therefore, overpaying for brown sugar, believing it to be uniquely beneficial, is irrational. You're paying for a marketing myth and, at best, a different flavor profile, not for added nutritional value. The healthiest strategy remains a conscious limitation of the total amount of added sugars in the diet, regardless of type and origin, and obtaining sweetness from whole, unprocessed sources, such as fruit.
That's all for today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. See you soon.